Hey guys, JD here, and today I'll be installing the new Kawi Performance Fuel Pump Mod Kit on my 2022 Kawasaki Ultra 310 jet ski. Stay tuned for the full installation tutorial. Alright, so I'm going to give you guys a quick overview of the kit, and then I'm going to tell you every step you need to get this fully installed. Make sure you give yourself at least one full day to unassemble your ski, install the kit, and put everything back together. Alright, so let's start with the pump itself. This is the heart of the fuel pump mod kit. So this is Kawi Performance's 250 liter per hour pump. So this isn't some kit you could just pick up at your hardware store. This here is a fuel pump base gasket O-ring, and that brings us to this spacer right here. This is a special spacer that's going to allow your fuel pump assembly to be accommodated by the existing tank. This is going to work in conjunction with the top part of your existing fuel pump assembly that has the float. So this right here is the assembly that is added onto the bottom of the existing fuel pump assembly. And you can see the pump basically, I'm just going to mock this up for you. The pump is going to go in there right like that. Not only was the fuel pump mod assembly designed in-house, but it's tested in-house as well. Kawi Performance subjected the fuel pump mod assembly to a comprehensive battery of tests to ensure that the flow and pressure rates not only exceed OEM standards, but are equipped to support high boost, high horsepower applications and extend maintenance intervals between filter changes. I'm confident installing the Kawi Performance High Flow Fuel Pump Mod in my own personal ski and look forward to the improved fuel pump performance I'll get from this unit. Alright, so the first step is we have to remove every single one of these 10mm bolts. We have to remove these clips that hold these shrouds on, including these ones right here. So I've got a little tray ready. We're going to remove everything and get this whole top assembly unbolted. Then we're going to have to disconnect our pods, disconnect our handlebar riser assembly. And this is the process that's going to be required for a couple different things. The process is the same for greasing the pivot bushing, replacing the fuel pump, installing a cold air intake, or even just changing your fuel filter. This is the same procedure. All right, so we've gone through and we've removed all of these 10mm bolts you have here. They're in the cup holders, they're in the front, and you'll see that this is roughly loose now. We have a couple more under this shroud here, so we're going to go ahead and pop these little push rivets out, pull them out. And this is clipped in here, so you don't want to pull this out or you'll break those tangs. So once you get those, you're going to tilt this like this. You can see the jog dials there. So you're kind of going to bend this, you're going to push the jog dial down with your thumb, and you're going to slide this over, and then this is going to kind of come down like that. See these tabs? You don't want to break those tabs. This part is like $12. I've replaced this once on mine already. It comes with those stickers. I've replaced that. It's a cheap part. Okay, so then we've got two more 10mm. All right, so now that we've removed all those 10mm bolts, you've removed your plastic clips, this whole assembly here basically can lift right off. So also you're going to remove these seals around each of your gull wing boxes. All right, so we're pulling this plastic shroud out of the way. It's got some push pins holding it in. You could just pull that out. Then that's going to expose our wire harness here for the display. You're going to reach in, disconnect this big clip just like that. Of course, the only thing holding it in now is the handlebar assembly. So we've removed all of our 10mm bolts, and you can see this is all loose now, but it's not ready to come out yet. Again, you're going to get these seals out of the way. So the next thing you got to do is pop your cell phone door out of the way. And you can see that in the bottom of this tray, there's a small styrofoam liner. You got to use your fingers, and then you're going to pull it up like that. You can see there's a little bit of water. All right, so these two 10mm nuts we're going to take out. You'll notice that I have an aftermarket steering riser and handlebar assembly on my personal ski. However, if you have a stock ski, you will likely have the OEM handlebar assembly. That's a little bit different to remove than this one here. It has quite a few shrouds and fairings on it that have to be removed in order to get it off. So if you have an issue with that, I highly suggest you reference your Kawasaki service manual for more information on removing the stock steering assembly and handlebars. Once your handlebars are removed, you can lift the top deck assembly off of the ski like this. Make sure to set it in a safe place. Okay, so now the whole top assembly is removed. Now we've got to remove this here. If while removing any of these plastics you have a brass insert come out of the plastic, don't worry, I have a whole video on repairing these. Make sure to check it out in my maintenance playlist. All right, and then you're going to just continue disconnecting everything from the harness here. You have to now remove the gull wing door right here. You do have to move that pin up just enough so that you can get to the lower bolt. All right, so then this here you can put out of the way, and now that that's clear, that can be removed. You have to do the same on this side. All right, so before you pull up that lower assembly, you need to make sure to remove these push pins here, or else you will rip this rubber, okay? So just make sure to get those out. You can see we're just going to pull that through. There you go. This whole assembly here is going to be removed from the ski. So now we've got that whole upper deck assembly removed. And this right here is our access door for the fuel pump. The airbox has to go out. So to remove that, that's going to be these two 10mm bolts right here. Also, what you're going to have to do is disconnect some of these hoses from the airbox. And to make it all easier, we're going to remove the tilt sensor coil bracket assembly, which is these two right here. All right, so that bracket I'm just going to set right there. You can see I've disconnected the voltage regulator clip, and just going to set that off to the side. See the airbox. It's loose in there now, but not ready to come out yet. So that's the stock airbox bracket. Then this airbox here, you could finagle it out of the ski. So there you go. It's removed from the ski. Now, even if you are planning to reuse the stock airbox assembly, these are the components. You should clean them up and put them aside for reassembly after you install your new fuel pump. All right, so here is a look at the airbox. You can see it in there with the cover removed. There is our fuel pump flange. What we're gonna do now is, if you are choosing to keep your stock airbox, then you're going to leave this in place, and you're going to leave all these hoses and everything in place. If you're planning to install a cold air intake like this one from Kawi Performance, you're going to remove your stock airbox from the ski now. I provide the instructions to do that in my Kawi Performance cold air intake installation tutorial. All right, so I'm going to leave the airbox in place for right now, for those of you who may be keeping your stock airbox. Those of you who are choosing to remove the stock airbox and install a cold air intake, now is the time to get the rest of these components out. So the first thing we do before we touch the fuel pump is we're going to crack the cap over here to remove any pressure, and then I'm just going to set that down right there. Then we're going to remove this quick connect here. All right, so you've got this up here. You just put your fingers on either side and pull this tab up and have a paper towel ready to catch any gasoline, and then very lightly rock this back and forth while pulling. Pull it off slowly, and then we're going to elevate it. We're just going to loop it right there by the dipstick. So now we're going to go ahead and get this flange out of the way. We're going to do that with a 7mm socket. Okay, so I've got those 7mm bolts out of the way. Now we're going to remove this flange. Now, if you've never taken your pump out before, it's going to have a chamber on it. If it's got that chamber on it, you're going to have to tilt your fuel tank from the front by removing, there's a band here and a band in the front. You're going to have to remove both those bands. You have to drain the tank and then tilt it. It's a very terrible process. Alternatively, you can essentially pop the chamber off of the pump assembly into the tank and then fish it out once you remove the entire pump from the tank. So if you don't have a chamber, then you can just lift this out like this. And then you obviously have your float, and you're going to slowly, very gently and slowly, okay? So now I've gotten the OEM pump removed. So our next step is going to be to assemble the new Kawi Performance pump assembly and get it ready to install. So if you are keeping your stock airbox, then you're going to have to remove this bracket here. This is the bracket that holds the airbox in place from the top. You're going to have to remove that because with this new spacer, the airbox is just going to have to sit in here. It's not going to be able to be attached to the original attachment point because this bracket is too thick. So basically, your airbox here, you can see I'm bending it out of the way for this flange just to show you. The airbox will just have to float in there. It'll be held in place by the supercharger duct. I highly recommend that at the time you do the install for the Kawi Performance High Flow Fuel Mod, you also install a cold air intake. You've already got the ski apart, so if you're going to do it, now is the time. Also, the stock airbox is a terrible design and makes it very difficult to access the fuel pump for service in the future. So again, I highly recommend that you upgrade to a cold air intake. This one from Kawi Performance is great and one of my favorites. Riva Racing also makes a decent cold air intake. All right, so here is our stock fuel pump assembly. And now what we've got to do is unassemble this in order to connect the core of this OEM assembly to the Kawi Performance adapter. So the first thing we're going to do, just so we don't damage anything, is we're going to remove these connectors right here. Okay, the first connector is for our float assembly. You should be able to pop out just like that. Be very careful with it. We're going to set that aside. Okay, so now your filter bag should pop right off like that. And then you've got a couple tabs. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what you want to do is just start with these. You could get a couple of them off. Just be very careful. You don't want to break this because we do need to reuse the top part, right? Whoops, that one reclipped itself. All right, and you can do it. You don't need any tools. All right. So there we go. So this part here, we're not going to need anymore. This is this plastic assembly. And then here is our stock fuel pump. When you pull this out, there's an adapter and some O-rings. Don't lose them, all right? Careful with these wires here and this little clip. Okay, so here's the stock Mitsubishi fuel pump assembly. You have this little plastic cap on the top here. I'm going to pull that off. All right, there's an O-ring in there. We're going to save that, set that aside. You can see there's another O-ring in there. If it's in there already, you could just leave it. And here's your fuel pressure regulator. Now this part, the way it is right now, is going to stay right like this, okay? We're not going to make any more modifications to the body. I just want to show you guys, this is the harness for the new pump. This is the same pump that was used on the previous generation Ultra 310s. This was Kawi Performance's high flow pump for the previous gen, so it's been well tested. It's a a really nice pump. The amperage draw is about the same as the Mitsubishi UC T35. Now I just want to show you the size difference between those. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our new Kawi Performance high flow pump. We're then going to take these O-rings that we have in this bag right here, and we're going to go ahead and install those all on the snout or shaft of this pump. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install this fitting we have right here. Now this fitting is going to go right like this with the flat part facing the assembly. The first thing we're going to do is put a little bit of motor oil on these O-rings just to lube them up. All right, so here's a little bit of motor oil. We're just going to spread that on to those O-rings. Put a little bit in this housing, and then very lightly you're going to work this onto the pump. You know, you don't want to force it down and roll the O-rings. You just want to work it like that. And then here's our harness clip. It only goes in one way. And you're going to see that this flat piece of that fitting is going to be parallel to your plug, just like that. All right, so now this is ready to install in our base assembly. So here is the aluminum adapter for our pump assembly. And you can see that this is going to go in pretty much only one way. So we're going to take this, we're going to slide it in, and you can see the bottom there is going to fit just like that, with the filter bag attachment point sticking out of the bottom just like that. And that O-ring we saved from earlier, right in there, you can leave it in there. We're just going to add a little bit of motor oil just to help seat it. And then we're going to take this. You can see that your fuel regulator is going to go right in there like that. And there you go. Now the next step is to secure the bottom assembly to the top part here using the included hardware. And then in your kit you'll see you have 4 aluminum bands like this, and then you have a set of screws. Your screws that are included with your kit might differ slightly from the ones you see here, but they will be sized correctly for the application. So you'll notice that there are some screws that are shorter and some that are longer. The shortest screw will go right here. This contacts the pump body, but we're actually going to put this one in last, and I will show you why in a moment. We're going to attach our fuel filter bag before we put that final screw in, and that's because once that screw goes in place, it holds your pump. It sets the pump in place, and we actually don't want the filter to bind up on the bottom of the housing here when we're attaching it. So what you're going to do is take these clips with the flat part like this, and you're going to put that flat part over the tab like that. Then you're going to take your screws and you're going to install those just like this. We're going to go through and put them all in loosely just to hold them in place, and then we're going to go back and tighten them. To give you guys a look at the Kawi Performance filter bag. That is, now this is a fine mesh bag. This bag is 31 microns. This is the factory bag. All right, so I just want to show you the factory bag could almost fit in this one twice. So this extends your change interval exponentially. And you know, the stock one here was pretty small. Surprisingly too, you could see that if the filter collapses on itself, that mesh, see how that mesh blocks the opening there? This filter has a plastic piece on the bottom with a spacer in there so that even if the filter kind of compresses, it can't collapse and choke off the flow to the pump. So you see this has this little lock ring here. So what you're going to do is flip the assembly over like this, and you can see that it only goes on one way. We're going to line it up like this, and we're going to press it into place. Make sure you grasp it like this and press firmly with the palm of your hand. I had to press, you know, pretty firmly to get it on there. All right, so there you go. And again, this is that really small factory filter that's, you know, could basically fit inside this one almost 2 times. All right, so you've got your filter on. Now we're gonna get the final screws in the assembly. Again, you wanna do it this way because the pump has to move a little bit to get the filter bag on. So that's what I found playing around with the kit. All right, so then our band is gonna go like that. Okay, so once you get all these clips in, the next step you're gonna do is you're gonna hold the assembly upright like this, okay? And each of these screws, you know, you might have over tightened a little. You're gonna make sure they're all fairly loose at this point, okay? We're gonna go through and make sure that they're all a little bit loose. And then what you wanna do, and you could push this against your torso like this or against the table. But what you wanna do is use a thumb to push down each of these straps. Tighten, tighten, push down, tighten, and then finally this one here. Push down and tighten. All right, so this is a look at our assembly. You can see these straps. Some of them might look a little bit like this. That's normal. They're just gonna hold that base in place just like that. So now we've got our wire harness here. You can see there's a little clip right there. So we're gonna go and route this. You're just gonna, you don't wanna break that plastic, but you're just gonna push the wires in one at a time into that clip. And then what I found is if you wrap this wire around the whole assembly, it then has the perfect amount of length to plug in right like that. So just to give you another look, this is how I've got it on mine. And then we're going to install, we have this band here. This is just a security band to keep these clips in place. It's not completely, they're pretty secure, but we're just going to loop this band around the top of the assembly like this. So now that band's in place, we have the wire harness in place here. All right, so our pump assembly, we've got our bag on, we've got everything assembled. So the next step is we have to install this spacer here before we install our float assembly. So what you're gonna do is just take the spacer, this peg here is gonna be pointing upward, and then you can see there's space. You need to put in that new tank O-ring that's included with the kit. So here is that new O-ring. We're gonna put that in right there. And then we're gonna take the pump assembly and we're just gonna put it through this just like that. So this can only actually go one way, and you'll see this is the top flange here, right? So it's got a notch on the outside for that, and then it's got this notch on the inside for that. So this assembly here is actually going to go like this. You're going to use those new longer bolts from Kawi Performance to install this in the tank. Remember, there's going to be another O-ring that goes on the bottom that should be sitting on your tank. The next step is going to be to reinstall our float assembly. So this goes in from the top. It has a snap clip right there. So literally just slide it down like that. Clips into place. You can see no obstructions. Take your connector. And that connector is going to get reinstalled right there. Make sure they're tight. And there you go. This is now ready to put into the ski. This is your original O-ring, right? If it's in good shape, you can reuse it. If not, if it's stretched out, you should replace it. So the pump is going to go in with this fuel port facing the rear of the ski. And you kind of got to angle it to get the float in. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do that now. So we got our float in first. You're going to hook that in, being careful not to damage it. We're going to push the filter bag through. And we're just going to carefully lower everything down in. So this I'm demonstrating with the Kawi Performance cold air intake. If you're doing this with the stock airbox, you'll have to push it away from the side here. All right, so once you get everything tightened down, it's now time to hook up the pump. And as you can see, my ski is all apart. So it's difficult to power it on to test the pump assembly. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start to put everything back together, just enough to get the pump fired up, start up the ski, make sure our pressure, everything is good. And then we're gonna conclude our assembly. All right, so I've got my fuel pump assembly fully installed. And at this point, many of you will just reconnect your fuel system and then reassemble your ski. But in my case, and this is something that I do recommend that you do. So before you put your ski back together, you want to hook everything up and you want to start up your ski and you want to make sure that your pump is functioning properly, right? Because there would be nothing worse than to put your whole ski back together just to find out that there's a problem, right? So I've got a pressure testing rig set up here. This basically just goes between my pump and my fuel rail. And I've got my display hooked up. I've got the immobilizer hooked up. Everything's still apart. But you can see here's my start stop switch. So you can see right when you start, when you stick your key in, the pump will come up to pressure. So that's 50 PSI right there. And it's holding that pressure. It will pressurize before it starts. Remember that the start stop switch is disconnected, right? So you're gonna need to use this button right here to shut it off. And we're running a 60 PSI at idle. You can see when the ski shuts off, it drops down right there. Everything sounds good. So now that you've done that quick test, I have no water connected right now. If you'd like, you can connect the water and run it for a little longer while it's apart. But I personally just wanted to do a quick test to make sure everything's, that the pump's assembled correctly. All right, guys. And finally, to round off my installation, I will be installing this Kawi Performance external fuel filter. So I'll be mounting this right inside the hull there. This kit comes with all of the proper clamps and hoses to get it installed. And I will be doing that in a separate video just because of the length of this tutorial. I don't want to stretch it out any longer, but make sure to stay tuned for my installation of this external filter. This is something I highly recommend that you add to your ski as well. Well, I hope this video was helpful. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me or email Kawi Performance directly if you have more technical questions for them about the kit. Thank you guys for watching. Special thank you to Kawi Performance for supporting JD's Waterworld and Kawasaki enthusiasts everywhere. For more information on Kawi Performance products, visit them online at kawiperformance.com. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more exclusive jet ski content, only on JD's Waterworld.